When we were introducing the Digitizer or working with the Digitizer, we encountered the Modify Feature Info dialog box, and we said at that time that you're going to see this again and again and again. Well, here is another time where you're going to see the Modify Feature Info dialog box, because what we're going to do is we're going to simulate the process of, well, initially digitizing. Again, we're going to recap a little bit of that process, but we're going to do that for the purpose of addressing the idea of adding attributes, adding information to the features that we're drawing. And as I said in the introduction to this section, that is arguably a more important component of a GIS, is to actually have information to manage. So we're going to simulate that by adding a new property to our parcels layer. So if you have already the parcels workspace open, you're good to go. I'm going to open it from the control center once again, file, load workspace. It will be again in our My Maps folder as we left it previously. It's still here. We'll click open, and this is what we've been working with. Again, we're just going to simulate the process of adding a new property. Now, I was researching where might be a good place to place this new property. This is all made up, by the way. And I looked at this little neighborhood right here. I thought this might be a good location. So if you do want to follow along with what I'm doing, feel free to follow me to this location, or if you want to choose another location to add a new property, by all means. I have my zoom tool activated here. I'm just going to draw a box around this neighborhood, again, just showing you where I am. And it looks like we have a nice little row of properties here. Little do they know, but we're going to add a new one onto the end here. We're going to digitize a new property, a little rectangle here. Again, the geometric characteristics are not of any importance. What we will focus on, as I said, is the idea of adding information. Now, before we do that, I'm going to use my info tool, feature info tool, as we introduced in our previous section, just to take a look at what we have already. Now, this is the information that is available in the existing properties. Again, house number, house name, street type, very structured attributes here. Each of the features in the layer obviously has the same attribute fields, obviously different values for each. So there's our challenge. How do we add that information when we draw our new feature? So first things first, let's draw a new property. And for this, we're going to go back to the Digitizer Create toolbar, and once again, we're going to create an area feature. If you're following along, just grab that tool. Do not worry about any accuracy here. One thing you'll note here, by the way, when you are adding a new feature, there is a process of snapping. Snapping will ensure that an adjacent feature attaches itself to its neighbor. That can be disabled. There's a configuration option to disable that if you don't want it, but it is enabled by default. So I'm just going to draw a rectangular feature in this area. Again, feel free to play along. Again, if you recall, we're not worried about completing the polygon. We just right-click on the penultimate point. So basically it's 1, 2, 3, 4 clicks, the fourth of which is a right-click. And this is the important part of the process. If you recall, we assigned this feature to a layer when we created our lake polygon. There was no existing layer. Now there is. There's a Black Mountains parcels layer. So I'm going to select that layer. Now, one thing that you'll note here is this is blank and empty. The attribute field is blank and empty. If you're starting this process from scratch, you definitely have the option to simply add an attribute or add whatever attributes are relevant. It's not very efficient, but if you're starting from scratch, it may be the only option. When you click the Add button, you can type in an attribute name, that's the name of the field itself, and then apply the corresponding value. Now, I'm not going to do that in this case. Needless to say, you can, and it's a very simple process. In fact, when you add an attribute name, it will remember that, and it will allow you to select from a drop-down list, as you can see here, of things you've typed recently. So there's a little bit of assistance in terms of the assignment of attributes, but again, not very efficient. I'm going to cancel this process. I'm going to cancel again. It will remove my drawing because I want to show you a more efficient way to achieve what we need to achieve in this case, which is basically assigning the attributes that are already available for each of the other properties. Now, this is a little bit of a trick. What I'm going to do is grab the Digitizer in its edit mode. In other words, I'm going to deselect the drawing tool for now. I'm back in the Digitizer edit mode. You'll see my cursor says edit, and I want to choose one of the existing properties. It's just highlighted with the Digitizer. I'm not doing anything with it. Simply highlighting it or selecting it. I happen to have selected the neighboring property. Doesn't need to be the neighboring property, but it is selected. It's selected for a good reason. You'll see in just a second. Because I'm going to go back to the draw mode again, back to the create area feature. I'm going to repeat what I just did. I'm finding a hard time. There we go. I'm going to grab the Digitizer, create area feature tool, and once again, I'm going to draw my new property. We'll draw it very roughly once again. There's my rectangular feature. Hopefully you're seeing this on the screen. Right-click to complete the process. This time we have a few additional options that simplify the process of adding attributes. I've already assigned a feature layer from, well, I did that previously. It's remembered that, so it will be adding my new property to this Black Mountain Parcels layer. The attribute table itself is still blank, but I have a couple of options now. I can copy attribute names from the feature layer. In other words, having selected a layer to begin with, I can now add the attribute names themselves, which will give me essentially empty attributes. I would still have to edit each one to add the corresponding values, which simplifies the process to some degree. It ensures consistency in terms of the available attributes. I still have to type them manually. Now, based on the assumption that this neighboring property shares at least some of the attribute values with the property that I've drawn, I'm going to simplify this even further. And this is a very, very useful tool where not only can I apply the attribute names, but I can apply the values themselves. So it says apply settings from selected features because it does more than just attributes. Any visual characteristics that are applied, any specific changes that were applied to modify this, they would be applied to the feature I'm drawing as well, including, as you will see, the attributes. So simply by clicking this button, I get an identical set of attributes. Now, obviously some of these are going to be wrong. House number, as noted here, is 309. I would likely want to put a different house number in here. Maybe we'll make this 311. So having selected it, I'm going to choose the edit function. And we'll choose a different number here. We'll make this up, obviously, but if this was in the real world, this would be the actual number of that property. The street name and street type are the same. Object ID would likely be changed. Acreage will be changed. Tax value will be changed. But it is a residential property. I could make any additional modifications as needed, but much easier to do that based on attributes being present than it was starting from a blank slate. So once again, we'll click OK. And using my feature info tool, let me hit escape to deselect first of all. Grab my digitizer and deselect. Use my feature info tool with fingers crossed. We'll select our new property. And there we go. We have a complete set of attributes now for that new property. I could have done it manually. I could have manually assigned the attribute names and the values, but it's much simpler when you're assigning a new feature to an existing layer to select one of the features first and go through the process I just showed you. Now, one final thing to show here, the feature info is just a visualization of the attributes. There's no editing function in here. We can't change anything. But if you need to change attributes, you can use the same function within the attribute editor. Using the Digitizer, selecting the feature, you can right-click and you can choose Edit. And any of the attributes that were present in the layer you imported can be edited using the same process, using the same dialog box, using the same modify feature info. So again, select an address, select edit, and you can update it. Again, just choose whatever value or type in whatever value is applicable. So the editing function works within the same dialog box that we saw when we initially created our new feature. So that's just a quick example of the process of manually and in a way automatically adding attributes to a newly digitized feature.